for asking me to be the president of this jury. I will first present the member of the jury. Caroline Prodhon, professeur at UTT, Ammar Oulamara, professeur et researcher at L'Oréal Nancy. It's the two reporters of your work. The team that directed your work, Philippe Lacomme, professeur at Université Clermont-Auvergne, Garaix, professeur at École des Mines de Saint-Étienne, and Tchernev, full professor at Université Clermont-Auvergne. And finally, your servant, Pierre Castagna, professor at Nantes University. So you have 40 minutes to present your work, and after we ask you some questions. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Ivan Pena. Our subject is the truck driver scheduling problem under the European Community Social Legislation. My thesis advisors are Professor Philippe Lacomme, Professor Garaix, and Professor Tchernev. This is the presentation outline. First, I'm going to make an introduction to the subject. Later, we are going to discuss some related work. Afterwards, we are going to make a brief presentation and some results for the problem with preemption and without preemption. And afterwards, I'm going to present some conclusions and perspectives. We take two general assumptions to develop the work. First, we start with an assumption without preemption to solve the problem. And secondly, we start with an assumption without preemption, with preemption. So. And for each of them, we develop two different solution methods, one linear model and one label setting algorithm. The objective function for all of them is the completion time. And in the case of the linear model, without preemption, we found that it was easy to extend. We also start with it because it's the most easy problem. And later we are going to increase the difficulty of the problem with when we take into account preemption. For the linear model, we include some of the constraints that were not taken into account in the past. For the label setting, we found that the model is more efficient than to evaluate the problem than the MIP. And also we found that with a small number of labels we can find good solutions. In the case with preemption, this is the first linear model which takes into account all the social legislation for 1 week. And also we found that the quality of the solution depends on the number of nodes, of preemption nodes that we take into account. And for the label setting algorithm, in the case with preemption, we found that it brings optimal solutions in a very competitive running time, and it is more efficient than the linear model. This is a brief here we can see some of the rules that we took into account. So if we group them, they are grouped by driving, working, shift duration, and the night working rule. Here we see a schedule. In this schedule, we can see there are some breaks that are taken into the sequence. Here, you can see that the shift begins at the end of the daily rest and ends at the beginning of the next daily rest. In this sense, the shift is different from the sense of a day, because the day starts at the midnight and usually ends at the midnight. In this case, it is not like that. And also we can see two rules. The first rule is that we need to enforce that the shift duration plus the daily rest must be less than 24 hours. There are these lines in gray, on gray. And the night working rule, that is, if you perform some night working, your total working time should be less than 10 hours. Here in the first three intervals, we can see that there is some night work developed. In that case, the cumulative working time should be less than 10. But on the contrary, in the two last intervals of 24 hours, since there is no night work, we can work more than 10 hours. Here we can see two schedules. In these schedules, at the beginning, in the first one, we start as soon as possible. But while trying to start as soon as possible, we see that we arrive too early to the first customer, and therefore we need to schedule one rest since we have the limitation of the daily rest of the chief express, that is 15 hours. So the thing that we did is to try to move to the right the beginning of the shift in order to avoid those waiting times, and by doing so we can avoid to schedule that daily rest at the beginning. And another example of the problems that we could have is here we can see three schedules that works during the night. In the second one, we try to move the beginning of the shift by 1 hour, but while trying to finish at the same completion time, 46. The problem is that he reduced this break at the end, and the total working time during the 24 hours is greater than 10. So the solution becomes infeasible. So in order to retrieve a feasible solution, we need, again, to increase the break at the end. So in this case, the completion time also increase, but the solution is feasible. So that's another example of how the network constraint applies. Here, there is another constraint that is related with the driving time. If you drive more than 4.5 hours, you need to schedule one break of 45 minutes. And we can make the analogy that if the driving rules could be considered as the maximum time lag between the starting times of activities. That means that those are negative arcs. There are arcs with negative cost that modify the starting time of consecutive activities. Taking into account that, if we see for example, for the vehicle routing problem, if all the arcs are positive, we can make the sequence evaluation in linear time. But in the case when we start in the problems that we consider negative arcs, the problem becomes NP-hard. In our problem, that is the conjecture that the problem is NP-hard. And if we make the comparison between the routing problem, the general routing problem, and the routing problem, including the European Union rules, for the vehicle routing problem, if we schedule all the activities at the earliest possible time, we could find a feasible solution. But that is not true any longer when we include the European social rules. In this example, this is just one example at the beginning. It could be in the middle of the sequence or any other place in the sequence. If we have the completion time minimization as the objective function and only one constraint, that is the maximum shift duration of 15 minutes, here the first schedule starts as soon as possible, and the chip duration is greater than 15 hours. So the solution becomes infeasible. So in order to gain feasibility, we need to move it to the right to get a feasible solution. How much we need to move. And okay, now that is a general description of the problem. Now the related work. So in terms of the linear models, all of them work under non-preemption assumptions, all of them. And most of them, there are several rules that were not considered, like working rules, split daily rest, and the night constraint. And in terms of the label setting implementations, all of them are interested in finding one feasible solution. They apply only preemption on driving activities. And in the most recent contributions, the night working constraint, they use a simplification of this rule. They don't tackle the real European Union rule. And here also we can see that Drexler and Prescott-Degnon, they make the conjecture that the problem is NP hard, and under the European Union social legislation, and the problem is also NP hard under the United States hours of service. That is the same legislation, but in the United States. I mean, and in that case, Xu et al., they make also the conjecture that the problem is NP hard. Also, there are previous works that found algorithms to find feasible solutions in linear time, in polynomial time. So now the TSP with preemption. This is the first problem. For the first problem, so we have the sequence of customers. The sequence starts at the depot and ends at the depot. We link to each customers and the depot. We link to activities, that is the service and the transport to the next customer. And we would like to know how long is going to be the break, 50, 30, or any other duration. Breaks in this first approach, breaks are could take place only when the activity is completely gone, so there is no preemption, and the places where the break could take place are fixed at the beginning. So in this case, what we did is to include some of the rules that were not included before, like daily driving extensions, daily reductions, and the constraints related with the working time. So in this case, we have one linear model, one label setting algorithm, and we propose a new set of instances and detailed set of solutions at the web page. So what are the drawbacks in this kind of assumption with preemption? So the drawbacks is most of the literature work under preemption assumptions. So a model working under preemption assumptions is useful to make comparisons. Do not neglect previous and common approaches to solve the problem, and also is a far more complex problem than the version non-preemptive version. Another drawback of the assumption without preemption is it is likely to find infeasible solutions. For example, when the driving time between two customers is greater than 4.5 hours, there is no place where you can where you can put the brake in order to satisfy the rule. And we can, with this approach, we can insert some intermediate nodes in order to avoid infeasibility. that is parking loads or some things like that. But we don't know how many of them or where we need to put them when we are making the net. And those are the drawbacks. So that's the reason why we moved to the preemption assumption. For the linear model, we know again the sequence in advance. We would like to determine how long is going to be the break. In this case, we work under preemption. That means that we can put the brakes anywhere in the middle of the activity. The brakes doesn't have a fixed position in the sequence. And according to Goel and Irnich, when driver regulations are considered, the solutions for the routing problem are most likely to be infeasible if we apply the European Union rule, as we showed at the beginning in the introduction. Also, according to Titre and Goel, there is no polynomial time algorithm to solve the TSP problem subject to the European Union social legislation. This is for the linear model. This is the data structure that we use. There we start with the sequence that starts at the depot, that ends at the depot. For each of the customers and the depot, we assign two activities, service and driving. And for each of the activities, we assign some preemption nodes that are the nodes where we are going to, those nodes are the nodes that we are going to use to schedule the brakes. So that's the data structure that we use. This is more or less the description of the linear model. We have 5 groups of constraints. Some of them are related with a sequence between activities, full brakes and split brakes, chief driving time, chief spread and extensions, and a working constraint. For the model dimensions, we can see that the number of variables and the number of constraints, they are quadratic with respect to the number of nodes that we consider. And in this small example, with 5 clients, we assign 14 activities. It's 5 plus 2 times the depot multiplied by 2, this is the 14. We have 7 brakes. The number of nodes that we assign in this small example is 3, so we have 42 nodes and 7 intervals for the net. In that case, we will have more than 30,000 variables, almost 10,000 binary variables, and the number of constraints is about 80,000 constraints. So this is an example of the constraints. These constraints enforces a daily rest for each interval of 24 hours. In this case, we make the difference between the starting time of activity U, this one, and the finishing time of activity B, here. We make that difference, and that difference should be less than 24 hours if there is no daily rest in between the two of them. If there is no daily rest in between of them, we need to enforce that difference should be less than 24 hours. And these are some of the constraints related with the night. And in that case, what we would like to do is that the working time between activities U and V, W, O, U, V, should be less than 10 hours if the starting time and the finishing time of activity U and V is less than 24 hours, they are in the same, within the interval of 24 hours, the beginning and the end of activity U and V, if they are in the interval of 24 hours, and if you have work at least 1 minute during the night. If those two conditions holds, the constraints also holds. And in the second case is a particular case of the first one, but in this case, the 24 hours interval finish in the middle of the processing time of the last activity. So this part of the working time shouldn't be considered in the 10 hours of working time. So we remove this part, beta, from the working time between U and V, and also the constraint holds when the starting time of both of the activities. U and V is between the 24 hours, the starting time of U is in the 24 hours, but the finishing time of V is not in the 24 hours, it's here, out of the 24 hours. And if you have work during the night, if those three facts holds, we need to enforce that the working time between those two activities should be less than 10 hours. And these are the set of instances that we use. We use two sets of instances, PGLT and GM, and we put a limit on the total running time of 2 hours, and we also modify the parameters to be multiples of 15 minutes. So these are some of the results. The first thing that we did is to compare the simplified version of GOEL in 2018 with the European Union rules. And what we found is that the European Union assumptions brings a total improvement of 6 hours, and the number of instances with improvement were 55, and the average improvement in minutes is 32 minutes. So there is an advantage in using the European Union assumptions instead of the simplified version that we found in the literature. And also, this comparison was there with the results that we found for GOEL 2018. Later, we make the comparison between the two assumptions using the linear model, our linear model. And in that case, for GM instances, we found an improvement of 4 hours, a maximum improvement of 4 hours. The number of instances with improvement was 45, and the average improvement was 24 minutes. Also, for PGLT, we also found these improvements. And what will be the advantage of using the simplified version is that it is faster. So when we compare the running times, here, the simplified version of the European Union brings a quite faster algorithm. So it's easy to solve it. But of course, in our set of instances, because for the GOEL that is the modified instances from GOEL 2018, there is no infeasible solutions, but for our instances, we found that 9 of those instances become infeasible if we apply the simplified version. The simplified version, it says that the night working is forbidden, so it is a more restrictive constraint. So these are the key points for the MIP. This is the first linear formulation that includes all the rules from the European Union rules for 1 week. The number of preemption nodes was computed based on the label setting solution. The efficiency of the method highly depends on the number of preemption nodes per activity, and it finds the optimal solution almost for all of the instances that we test. Now the label setting for with preemption assumption. In this case, it works on discrete time. It uses a parameter that is called delta, that is used to divide the intervals of time. The labels are saved in a particular node I until the activity is completely finished. Breaks and rests have minimal duration, albeit the rest, we can increase the rest, and we need to keep trace of the night work during the last 24 hours in the label. And this is the general flow for the algorithm. We take one label, we compute for that label the processing time. After we compute the processing time, we apply the resource extension functions to compute the resources of the label. After we do that, we check if the solution satisfies all the European Union rules. Afterwards, we apply dominance rules. If the label is a good solution, we put it into a set of solutions. If we are not at the last activity, if we are at the last activity, we put it in the set that we call best, and we select the best solution that we found. And these are some of the attributes that we keep in the label. Among of them, we have the beginning of the shift, the current time, the starting time of the current shift, also the cumulative driving and working time, and this one that is important, that is the one that we use to track the working time periods during the last 24 hours interval. And with respect to the extensions, we have two types of extensions. The first extension is processing followed by a break. We have also three cases. The first case is we move, we extend, we process until a rule is broken. We also extend until the activity is finished. When the activity finished, we stop the process. And also when the night constraint, when the night interval, when we arrive to the night interval, we stop the process because we need to check if we are going to work during the night or if we are going to skip the night. And the second type of extension is with idle. Also with idle we have three cases. The first case is when we would like to extend the daily rest. That's the first case. The second case that we will use idle is when we arrive too early to a customer, so we are going to use some waiting time. And the third case is during the night interval. During the night interval, we can also jump to don't work during the night with idle. And with respect to the dominance procedure, we apply dominance over a set of a given activities saved at node I. We take one candidate label lambda k and we compare with all the labels that have the same current time. We compare all of them, and in general what we do is we start to compare each of the resource attributes, and the label that has less resource consumption for each of the attributes, that label is the candidate label that dominates, that can dominate the second label. And this is the case for the night. So in the case for the night, we compute the cumulative working time. We start from the right to the left, and we start to compare for each time interval of 50 minutes of delta. we start to compare the total working time, the cumulative working time, and in this case, we found that the cumulative working time of lambda 1 is greater than the cumulative working time of lambda 2. In that case, we say that lambda 1 cannot dominate lambda 2 because they use more resources. If we make the same, for the same two labels, we make the same comparison, at this point, we see that lambda 2, it has more cumulative working time than lambda 1. In that case, we also can say that lambda 2 cannot dominate lambda 1. And these are some of the results. We use the number of preemption nodes based on the label setting solution. The average running time for the label setting is 6 and 12 seconds for PGLT and GM instances. And the label setting is 30 and 10 times faster than the mean for PGLT and GM instances. And on average, the label setting inserts 700,000 labels and discards 1.9 million of labels per instance in GM instances, set of instances. Now we are going to compare the 9 assumptions, but for the label setting. Here we found that the European Union rule yields a reduction of 32 minutes in the completion time. And the label setting algorithm for being the night is 65 times faster than the label setting under the European Union rules. And here we make the comparison between the 3 assumptions for the night. The first one is no night, so you are going to schedule without taking into account anything about the night. And the second one is for forbidding the night work, FNW, and the third one is the European Union rules. So what we found is that the one that forms the smallest average completion time is the no night, when you don't include the night, and also is the fastest among of the 3 of them because it's easier. You don't care about the night. So the second that is faster is when you forbid the night, and also brings the second largest. In that case, it is faster, but the average completion time is greater. And what is particular here is that if you don't consider the night and you apply the European Union rules, 70.5 of the schedules that you found without any concern about the night becomes infeasible. And if you forbid the night and you compare the solution without considering the night, 34 of those instances will become infeasible if you forbid the night. And these are the conclusions. The label setting exhibits an efficient computational time. In average is 6 and 12 seconds for each type of set of instances. Forbidding the night drastically diminish the running time of the algorithm, but the European Union rule yields the better completion time, and the schedules without considering anything about the night are most likely to found infeasible solutions with respect to the night working. And our contributions is the MIP, that is the first one that works on the preemption, and discrete optimal label setting algorithm, which include all the rules from the European Union, including the night working rule, and also works on the preemption for service and driving activities. We also propose we enhance the number of tests from PGLT instances, and we present the results at this webpage. And these are the conclusions and the perspectives. So all in all, we found that the quality and the running times of the milk highly depends on the number of nodes that we use. And it is difficult to determine how many of those preemption nodes are going to take in the linear model. That's why we use the label setting solution to retrieve the number of nodes. And in the case of the label setting, the drawback is that we need to run in discrete time. However, it's efficient. It's faster and it brings the optimal solutions under discrete time. We also have 3 conferences without preemption, and we also have 3 conferences with the models with preemption. And these are the perspectives. We would like to reduce the running times of the label setting algorithm. We have started to do that. And the best way is to remove the structured data that we use to trace the night working, because we use an array of bit sets, and that array is too long, because if you have 24 hours and you divide it by 1 minute, you will have more than 1,000 and a half of positions to go backwards to see and to compute the total working time. So it's quite heavy to do. So that's the thing to do is to remove that in order to increase the running time of the algorithm. We apply sequences of breaks. That's the second thing that might helps to increase the running times of the algorithm. But it means to avoid waiting times. And also, among the perspectives is to solve the integrated vehicle routing and truck driver scheduling problem. Is that we don't only care about the sequences and the scale of the sequences, but to create the sequences. And we also would like another perspective. It would be the consider crew drivers synchronization. And that's it. Thank you. I think that's it.
Thank you very much for your presentation.